Welcome, everyone. Give me a second. I want. Welcome, everyone. Sorry for the split-second difficulty. Ellie and I were talking about things that happen on these shows. I actually forgot to put the countdown clock for a second or two, so it's a good thing we're not saying anything that we were going to regret later on and get reported to the FCC about. So, want to welcome Ellie very much. And I decided, Ellie, I'm going to put on my Mets cap as one fellow Mets fan to another. Yankee
Yeah,
fans, I get you, I get it, but for now, we're taking over this town, right?
absolutely. Hey, hello everyone, and hi Ken, and thanks. And I wish I thought about bringing my Mets cap, but consider it on.
Okay, but you did bring behind you. You have a wonderful picture of Jerry Garcia, and I think you actually put that on your LinkedIn profile about that. So, what's the backstory on Jerry Garcia? I mean, I'm
Well,
not a deadhead like you are, but
there are two. There's this lithograph, and then there's that pen and ink. Um, and I don't have to say that Jerry Garcia is my musical and spiritual idol. Actually, um, yeah, I was one of those guys that can legitimately argue that I attended probably 120 Dead concerts from 1969 through 1993.
mm-hmm.
Um, it was and still is a part of my life. This I bought when I moved into an office in 2006. This was a 75th birthday present for my son.
Really?
It's got the lyrics to three of Jerry's really special favorite songs spelled out across the whole piece. It's a marvelous piece, and that's what greets me in the morning when I walk into the office every day. And today, as some of you may know, is the anniversary of the death of Jerry Garcia.
I actually didn't know that when I was planning this.
You know, Jerry was born on August 1st, 1942, and he died on August 9th, 1995. He was 53. And ever since, these 8 days, from the 1st to the 9th, or the 9 days, um, get commemorated in very serious, very complete fashion by deadheads all over the place. My sister the other day said, "You know what it's like? It's actually like our chance to sit Shiva every year." So, this is the final day of the commemoration of the last week of Jerry's life. And needless to say, I've had the Grateful Dead station on the radio on Sirius XM. I've got the Dead playing on my computer today, listening to all of the great stuff. And the last song I'll listen to tonight is Ripple.
And Shiva, just for people that don't know, is like a sign of mourning. And I think we probably, this is a good time, if you will, because originally, Ellie, you and I were going to talk about 1,000 career columns and the longevity of that. But a couple of weeks ago, sadly, they discontinued your column. And I think the thing that probably pained you more than anything else was the inability to let everyone, all your readers, know over the years how much you appreciated the support. So, I mean, I'd love to give you an opportunity now to those who you may not have gotten a hold of, just to let everyone know, because I'm grateful to you, because you helped me in job search and you helped my kids in job search for sure.
Yeah. Thanks, Ken. Yeah, that was a bit of a touchy one. Um, Many of you, I'm sure, do know, and if you don't know, I was writing a weekly column in the Record North Jersey Media Group since June of 2003, and um, it was it was an absolute joy writing that column. Over the years, what started as a "hey, let's try it and see what happens" type of thing, um, it became a standard issue in the Sunday Record and Herald News. Um, In 2016, the founding family of the Record, North Jersey Media Group, the Borgs, sold the paper to Gannett. That's USA Today. And immediately there were tremendous layoffs, hundreds of people at a time. I thought my column was doomed, but my editor kept on protecting it. He knew the value of it, and he enjoyed it, and we worked well together. And second round of layoffs around 2018, severe. I mean, cutting to the bone. And my column survived. Third round of layoffs, and my column survived. But then, on July 14th of this year, I got an email from somebody at the Record whom I did not know, who said, "I'm writing to inform you that we are canceling the weekly jobs column that's coming from you, effective this week's cycle." Well, I was surprised. I was very disappointed. It's not that I haven't been here before. I mean, I'm a big boy and been in my career for 50 some odd years, and I've been fired before, and I've seen it hundreds of times. So they said that they had already received my column for the following Sunday, and they would run that, and that would be it. So when I collected my thoughts a little bit, I said, well, this is no way to go out after 19 years. And I've established relationships with readers that go back that far. Oh, for crying out loud, hold on. So after I realized that decision wasn't going to change, I asked if they could extend my column out 1 week so I could write a proper explanation and farewell and thank you to my readers. And the guy who had sent me that email, to whom I was speaking at the time, said, I don't know, I'll have to ask them. Now, this guy carried a VP title, and he didn't know how to make that decision. So I knew it came from elsewhere, namely Gannett corporate headquarters in Virginia. I mean, it was easy to figure that out. He didn't get back to me the next day, and the following Monday, my editor, who's a little bit down below him on the org chart, obviously, they say it rolls downhill. It rolled down to him, and he called me and he said, I'm sorry, but no. So from 1 week to the next, I was there as I had been for 19 years, and then I was gone. And that really upset me. So I sent out an email, I'm sure you got the copy of it.
Yeah.
Just explaining to everybody, look, I didn't just disappear. I would never do that. And so that's the story. For the moment, I'll continue. Well, I'm going to take a few weeks off. I haven't done that in 19 years. Starting in the fall, I'll be writing on my website, and I'll post on LinkedIn and Twitter and all of that. I must tell you that I still haven't finished counting the number of emails I've gotten from readers and friends from all over the country. From, needless to say, from here and New York, North Carolina, New Orleans, Los Angeles, I mean, all over the place. As a matter of fact, Switzerland as well.
Well,
and that's the story. That's it.
Yeah, and the whole thing really stinks. I know a lot of former coworkers of the Record that have shared that over time, but I want to talk about some positive things or some things that we can actually have the audience relate to. I think one of the things that we all talk about as career coaches is the whole mentality of the workplace, hybrid, remote, or in person. Do you have any specific thoughts as to where you think you see things are going now that we're out of the pandemic?
Now that we're kind of almost like maybe out of the pandemic, I have some very strong thoughts. Ken, I think that's probably the most important question you could bring up today.
Okay.
Look, the question of hybridism is far more complex than am I going to work at home or am I going to travel to the office? That was our knee-jerk reaction to what happened in March of 2020. And we all of a sudden, well, I say we, don't forget that a large portion of the workforce did not have the option of working remote. Mm-hmm. Nurses can't work remote. Cops can't work remote. The guys who fix the power lines for PSE&G can't work remote. Newspaper delivery guys can't work remote. So when we say we and we talk about working remote, it's far less than 50% of the workforce. But if we are professionally oriented, if we are coaches, or if we are bankers or financiers or restaurateurs, we tend to think in terms of higher level positions and positions that coincidentally come along with flexibility. Okay. Were it not for the great technology we have, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, things like that, we would have collapsed. We would have all had to go back to the workforce, and the death rate wouldn't have been 1 million Americans. It would have been 15 or 20 million Americans. So the technology saved us. But when you look at it, Ken, I would much rather be sitting across a lunch table with you than looking at you at a screen.
Sure.
And that's an important consideration, because how many of you all have been involved in one way or another in the improvement of your corporate culture? All of you. What's culture all about? Go on any company's website, and you'll find the place where they talk about their culture, their values, their teamwork, their ability to collaborate, their ability to work well together. Companies have been working on this, on their corporate culture, for decades. Make no mistake about this. Culture is something that cannot be developed virtually. Part of culture is the lunchroom, the way meetings are conducted, the birthday parties, the company softball team, the company's 100% participation in a 5K run for juvenile diabetes, things like this. That is what a corporate culture is all about. And companies have spent way too much time, not way too much, but an enormous amount of time over the decades building a corporate culture. And the companies that have done it well, make no mistake about it when they're hiring. You understand who you're being hired by. Okay. They will not put up long-term with people being out of the office more than they're in the office. It's just not going to happen. And we've already gotten that expression from many, many corporate leaders, from Tim Cook at Apple right on down. Tim Cook said in January of 2021, we're going back to the office. There is no replacing interpersonal collaboration. Okay, so that got delayed a couple times, but that's where they're headed. JP Morgan Chase is talking the same way. 3M is talking the same way. That's going to happen. But what this did was show us the value of thinking in terms in other than trudging to work for a 5-day week. Now, the big phrase in that sentence was 5 days. So let's put the working at home versus working remote thing aside. We've proven we know how to do that. We're pretty good at it. But how about not working a 5-day week at all anymore? And working 4-day weeks where people are overlapping, Monday through Thursday, Tuesday through Friday, Wednesday through Saturday, but a 4-day week. And it is a lot more imminent than many of us are aware of. I'm going to give you a couple examples. Well, before I give you the examples, the question was posed, could we reduce work from 5 days to 4, from 40 hours to 32, keep salaries and income the same, and increase productivity. Pretty interesting scenario.
Yeah, I want to just do a shout out to a bunch of people that are on the call. That I don't know if you know. Do you know Terry Seaman, who does a group in Central New Jersey?
Terry, I think I know who you are. I don't think we've had the pleasure of meeting.
Scott Dell, who's one of my contacts from the Carolinas. He works with the students down there.
Hello, Scott.
Sue Griffey from Boston. I'm looking at Paul Sakala, who does a group out in Parsippany. They have an exit. I think they're just changed into executives in transition.
Yeah, Paul and I have met.
Lisa Rangel, who speaks very highly of you.
Well, thank you. And I see that you've been linking me into a lot of conversations, Lisa.
Yeah, and then Alex Freund, you have so much to offer. What is your next venue helping job seekers?
Well, there's my good friend Alex. So nice to know he's here. So let me get back to this, because this is, I see this as one of the biggest seismic changes in, not in the workforce, in work. Now, if you think about the history of what I'm saying here, if you go back to the mid to late 1700s, we had the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. The next major change, fundamental structural change in work, happened in the 1860s when we began to unionize. The next was in the post-World War I era, when we began to digitize. Not necessarily on a desktop yet, but at the University of Pennsylvania, they were inventing this thing called UNIVAC and ENIAC. We entered the computer age. And by the 1980s or 90s, we went through the seismic change of globalization. Industrialization, unionization, computerization, globalization. 4 historic, significantly fundamental changes. And now we come to a 5th, and that's hybridism. That's how big this is.
So is there a balance between how much work from home and how much in the office, or does it depend on different industries?
Yeah, right. It depends. It depends. Okay. But let me get to the 4-day week for a second.
Okay, sure.
If y'all like your 3-day weekends, what do you think of the idea of having 52 of those a year? Iceland began a study in 2015, and they ran it for 5 years, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. And they were able to answer positively the questions that I gave. Can we reduce 5 days to 4? Can we reduce hours from 40 to 32? Can we keep salaries the same? And can we increase productivity? And the results were a resounding yes. And today, 86% of the Iceland workforce either works 4 days a week or is moving to a 4-day calendar. In Spain, on a larger scale, in 2017, they did 3 regional tests to see if they could get the same results, and they did. So in 2019, they did 1 national test with 300 companies all over the country, and they got resoundingly the same results. Unilever in New Zealand did the same thing and is just publishing their results now, and they're a big, big yes. And Unilever, with operations in 132 countries, is now considering making that standard. Now, if Unilever does that in 132 countries, game's over.
Now, would you be okay? I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut you off.
That's okay, Ken, please.
Is it okay if I put up some comments from other people for us to chat through?
Sure.
So Lisa Engel, culture can be developed virtually, and some in-person cultures are fake, but those that see it's fake don't speak up. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, culture cannot be developed virtually. We have a nose-to-nose confrontation here.
Okay.
There are examples of that. I'm not going to bring out the name of a company, but there's a company that was started and runs virtually. They have 1,700 employees. Their name is familiar to every one of you. And their founder is the first one to tell you, we don't have a corporate culture. We don't want a corporate culture. We just want to do what we want to do. The fact that some cultures are fake, I agree with entirely.
Mm-hmm.
But if we've all been around this planet long enough, we have good enough bullshit detectors to know what's what. But a real constructive culture, and there are basically three types of corporate cultures: constructive, passive defensive, and aggressive defensive cultures. It's very easy to get passive or aggressive when you're not unified. But a real constructive culture, Lisa, I have a friend who calls this a 3-beer conversation. And we could go back and forth on this. But the companies that are speaking up, the leading major companies, the JP Morgan Chases, the Apples of the world, are telling you this isn't happening unless we're going to be together. Now, we don't have to be together 5 days a week.
Right.
We don't even have to work 5 days a week anymore. But we've got to be together. One of the most creative organizations in the whole world, when you think of creative companies, we immediately start thinking of Amazon and Apple and biotech firms and things like that. But one of the oldest line companies in the United States in manufacturing is one of the most creative companies in the universe, and that's 3M. 3M invents things every day. 3M has invented 30,000 different adhesive compounds. 3,000 have come to market. The other 27,000 failed in order for the 3,000 to succeed. But among those 3,000 are Scotch tape, masking tape, and Post-it notes. Not bad. 3M doesn't want anything to do with a totally remote environment. Their scientists, if their scientists want to go wander off and think about the world as it is, that's one thing. But they give their senior scientists 15% of their time to do whatever they want, to be unaccountable. But the other 85% of the time is accountability and collaboration and teamwork, etc. So I'm a huge proponent of the fact that culture is developed in conjunction with one another.
So what about also, because what I hear a lot of, and we'll hear about, is the whole age discrimination. Older people can't work with younger people, and both sides blame the other. I think I call a lot of that as BS personally, because I think people make it worse than it has to be. What do you think?
Well, if the old people can't work with the old people should just fire the young people and run a company really well. I often listen. I hit the 50-year-old mark a couple of years ago, as you know, and I always have these fantasies of somebody dumping about $2 or $3 billion on my desk to say, "Go start a company." The front door would say, "Now hiring 50 and over." Ageism will never go away. We know it. And the older we get, the more we know it. If you are in the job market and you're looking for a job and you sense ageism, companies who are good at that are good at escaping being able to be proven that they're doing it. But if you see it, you're right. If you think you see it, you're right. Next bus, just get out of there. You're not going to change their minds. If they don't get the fact that you at 60 are more valuable than two 30-year-olds on their best day, then what do you want to work for that place for to begin with? The good news is that our workforce is aging, and it's aging because we boomers have stayed in it longer than we were expected to. Although COVID increased the rate of retirement of boomers over the last couple of years, but we're staying in it longer than we were expected to stay in it by the economists and the statisticians and the actuaries. That also means that our bosses, the managers, the directors, the vice presidents, the CEOs are also sticking around longer, and their propensity to hire older workers is higher than that of younger workers. So by nature, the workforce is getting older. But if you think you see ageism, you're right. Get the hell out of there. Go somewhere else.
So I love having a discussion like this. Corporate cultures are impacted by geographic regions. People in New Hampshire think and act differently versus the rest of the country. And I tend to agree with that. What about you?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think everything is impacted by geographic regions. Cultures form that way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's a reason that, for instance, the tech sector has about 5 major locations in North America. The tech sector is populated by wildly creative people, and not just creative in the way they think, creative in their lifestyles, creative in the way they dress, the way they care to communicate. But the highest concentration of really truly creative people, and I mean creative the way Richard Florida, who wrote 2 landmark books on the creative class back in the early 2000s, the way he described them. Now, Florida found that there's a high correlation, very high correlation, between creative people and people who have alternate lifestyles, people who are part of the LGBTQ community, people who are coming in from centers of learning in other parts of the world, etc. But it's the tech sector that attracts them. So look at the populations in Silicon Valley, San Francisco, Seattle, Austin, New York, and Cambridge, and then Toronto. What we would call metropolitan areas for sure, but they attract the creative people, and the creative people attract their, for instance, alternate makeup families. They attract their same-sex partners. They attract interracial couples and all of this. This is culture. This is going to look real different in Boston, Massachusetts, or Cambridge, Massachusetts, from the way it looks in Fargo, North Dakota. Or is Fargo, South Dakota? I forgot.
North Dakota. So this brings up the other thing. The current folks are going to want more work from home as a given benefit, and they'll call the shots. I do think the new generation is going to have a much different idea about working in general, because of what they've been exposed to. Do you tend to agree with this, about the fact that they're going to portray a different landscape, job search landscape?
It's a very insightful question, and I've got an answer that may be a little bit longer than you expected.
Okay.
I wrote an article recently dubbing the new generation of workers who have entered the workforce since the onset of COVID. And I'm calling them baby Zoomers. So from this baby boomer, I'm calling them baby Zoomers. But what's behind that is that many of these young new workers have never been to their office.
Mm-hmm.
They have never met their boss. They have never met their coworkers. And there's already plenty of evidence that they're feeling lost. They haven't been onboarded properly. They haven't been trained the same way. They haven't had their diapers changed, that kind of thing. Now, it makes me think, and I wonder if anyone here has ever read Plato's Republic, especially Book 7, The Allegory of the Cave, which is a dialogue between Socrates and Plato's brother, in which they talk about a hypothetical situation in which a bunch of men are held captive in a cave, chained so they can see only the inner wall, and behind them is a flame, a fire, which casts shadows on the wall. And after a while, they begin to see these two-dimensional shadows as reality. Now, what would happen, the question was posed, if one day one of these men were released and taken out into the sunshine being the symbol of truth and vision? Would he adjust to reality the way we know it, or would he want to run back into the safety and security of the cave? So it's an existential question, but it got me to thinking when I was on a Zoom call and there were all these little shadows on the screen, that I was looking at the inside of that cave wall, and so was everybody else. And reality was a two-dimensional thing that I couldn't touch and I couldn't laugh with, and blah blah blah. Are we faced with the same limitations that Plato described in Book 7 of the Republic? My answer was, unfortunately, not 100% fortunately, but unfortunately, yes. The young generation that does not know the the joys of trudging to work every single day in the snow and the hot weather and everything else had better get used to it. They will be the first generation that will not have to go to work 5 days a week. But if they think they can spend the rest of their careers shuffling around in their slippers, going to the refrigerator 4 times a day and playing with the cat, they had better get a little grip of reality, because it's not going to work. However, picking the good parts of that, I think we'd be very smart to make sure we did.
So I want to do another shout out here. Claire Davis and I, we actually do a LinkedIn audio event. We're going to be doing one next week. Claire Davis is based, I believe, in Washington State, and we talk about resumes and the like. I think for me, the biggest challenge when I work with people of different ages, it's ironic that they have the same issues, but in reverse. People that are younger have a hard time getting experience, and the people that are older say they have too much experience. So they find different types of ways that they need to position themselves to be able to do the jobs. Do you think there is a similarity between the different groups in that way?
Well, yeah, and the similarity is that they all need a little bit of help, a little bit of coaching in figuring out what their message really should be. The youngster, how many young job seekers have we worked with who are applying for jobs that they're not going to get? Right. Go for that entry-level job. Play up, not the fact that you got 20 years experience. You're not even on the planet for 20 years, give or take. But talk about the fact, for instance, when I do a resume for a young recent graduate, I always put not only the university and the degree that they earned, but the courses they took and selected projects that they've done. So they can say to an employer, look, I'm coming out fresh. I'm young, I'm energetic, I'm strong, I'm eager, I'm ready to go. And I see things in different ways, which may be a good thing for you. But the best I can offer you, look, I did a project in my financial analysis class where I looked at the performance of 3 banks. Or I led a group in my chem lab class that looked at mRNA sequencing. Give them what you got and then deliver on that. As far as the older worker, guys as old as you, Ken, or God forbid as old as me, don't try to compete with the young or the 30 or 40-year-old. You're not going to do that. But what they can't compete with you on is your ability to use the judgment that you've built up over 30, 40, 50 years and do things like mentoring and helping to put training programs together and being there when a younger worker needs a little bit of advice. No amount of salaries or anything else can buy that. And that's what you got. So whether you're an older worker or a younger worker, promise what you can deliver and then deliver what you promise. And that's what, to answer your question, Ken, what they have in common.
I also think that there's a lot of information out there that is suspect when you read about it online, some of the information. I think it's hard sometimes to know what the right information is. So I think it's so important for people to ask the questions and take everything out there with a grain of salt, because not every bit of information works for everyone the same way.
Boy, you made 2 great statements about the veracity of information and then the usefulness of it for different people. But you're right. And so the way I like to put it is, if you went to the doctor right now and the doctor said you need surgery, what would you do? You wouldn't say, okay, where's the ER or the OR? you'd get a second opinion. Why?
Mhm.
Because you want to make sure that that first opinion was the right opinion. I think it's the same thing with career advice or anything else, or financial advice. If I give you a little bit of advice on your job search or your career planning or anything else, listen, I think after all these years, I'm giving some pretty good advice, but you should challenge my advice. Anyone should. Why do you say that? What would be the consequences if I did that? How would that work? Challenge the advice. And when you do, you start to develop more of a multidimensional approach, and you can make decisions and judgments as to whether they're right. And the same advice for you is not the same advice for somebody else either. So it has to be personalized. I love that question.
I think one of the challenges that people have is putting themselves out there and letting people know what they can and can't do. I think from our generation, especially, I used to be afraid to ask questions at work. I used to be afraid to come across like I don't know anything. And people of the younger generation, they have no problem asking questions. They have no problems being inquisitive. And I don't know if you find that or not when you're talking to different clients.
Um, that varies. It depends. See, here we go with culture again. If the culture of an organization encourages questions and challenges and out up against each other in a sensible way. In other words, one person offers a thesis, second one offers an antithesis, and together they form a synthesis. That kind of argument is very, very healthy. So if the culture of an organization says, yeah, that's good, nobody's going to be afraid to ask questions. Questions are great things. Socrates used that was a Socratic method. Ask a question, get an answer, question the answer the question the answer, and that goes on infinitum. So the other side of the coin is you go to a company that frowns on that. You're cooked. It's just never going to happen. So it depends on the culture of the company.
One of the things I also try to tell job seekers is there are things you cannot control. So stop trying to change things. You can't control perceptions, and you can't control what you are or not. It's really about putting yourself in the best light. And do you tend to agree with that, or?
Yeah, I do. There are things you can't control, that's for sure. But there are things you can influence.
Mm-hmm.
And so work on what your message is. Who is it that you're telling the world you are? What are the things you're capable of doing? What are the promises you can make and keep? How do you build your own image? Some people call it branding. I'm skeptical of that term because people are so busy with the idea of branding themselves that they forgot to work on the product. And before the brand, the product is important, but work on the product. Who are you? Who will you be? I just had a wonderful conversation with a young man yesterday who came out of undergraduate school in 2019 as a finance major. A lot of things shut down at that time. He was having a hard time getting a job. And in February of 2020, just as pandemic was about to hit, he got a job in the supply and distribution channel of in the aerospace and aircraft manufacturing business. He oversees a couple thousand orders a day for parts for airplanes and for service technicians and all this other kind of stuff. You know what he's in now? Whether he knew it or not, he's in supply chain. So now his message to the world, and he's doing a very good job on his job search, is that I have the finance background. I can do financial modeling. I can do financial analysis. I know a little bit about financial management. But now, and what he's done is he's gone on Coursera.org and he's taking like 3 supply chain logistics, supply chain management courses. And with a finance background, he's interviewing in 3 different places right now. He's about to get his second interview in a pretty formidable company in that business this week. So what he's done is he's formulated a good, clear message as to who he is. There's your key right there.
So without giving too much away, did you have a next column that you were going to publish in the record that they didn't let you, and want to share that, or do you want to save that like for your blog?
Um, well, I did, because I'm always working weeks ahead,
Okay.
and sometimes I interrupt that when there's big news. Instead of answering that directly, let me
Okay.
tell you what would have been in the paper this week.
Okay.
Anybody look at the jobs report that came out on Friday? It was off the freaking charts for the 19th straight month. The economy added 528,000 jobs. The economy added 2.74 million jobs in the first 6 months of the year. The economy added 6.75 million jobs last year. That was 2.5 million more than the largest year on record. Now, if you know anything about baseball, Ken, you do. You know that a hitter can have a hitting streak, but after a while he goes 0 for 4 for 3 games in a row. Our economy has not gone 0 for 4 since January of 2021. It has been the most prolific jobs creation economy in history, including during the periods when we were running wartime economies, World War II, Korean War, when we were creating jobs all over the place and unemployment was 2.5%. There's a lot of talk now about the inflation rate and that it could conceivably lead to a recession. Now, people who know in their economics books where the definition of recession is will tell you we're in one because we've had 2 quarters in a row with negative growth. We're not anywhere close to a recession. And the positive attitude we need to take out of this is what was going to be in that article. The thing that has kept the entire economy from going into recession is the subset of the economy called the job market. That's how powerful it is. With 11 million open jobs, with a turnover rate higher than it's ever been, with a quits rate higher than it's ever been, with a hires rate higher than it's ever been, and with a layoffs rate lower than it's ever been. Now, one of the problems that people have when they go out into the job market is they get scared. There are no jobs. I can't get a job. Nobody's hiring. They're not going to hire me because I'm old, blah, blah, blah. What if you were to change that attitude and say possibilities are all over the place? There are 2 open jobs for every job seeker. That would be me included. And companies are hiring like crazy, and they've made it known that they are having a difficult time finding new candidates. How would that change in attitude change your performance in your job search? I think that question answers itself.
I want to end today with a thing from Elliot Hollander, and then we'll end it for there. Discussing the value of putting yourself out there to motivate others and yourself, like volunteering to conduct a mock interview for a fellow job seeker. What do you think about that?
Who is this that just made this comment?
This is Elliot Hollander discussing the value of putting yourself out there to motivate others and yourself, like volunteer to conduct a mock interview, etc.
Elliot, nice going. I don't. From time to time, I devote an entire column or even a series of a couple columns to the value of volunteering. Listen, I was brought up in a household where we learned to volunteer. I was doing volunteer work when I was 7 years old. So I think it's a part of our life, and I think we owe it to ourselves to do it, and we owe it to everybody else. None of us should be leading our lives 100% for ourselves. We should go out and volunteer and spend some of the time we have on others and some of the money we have with others. So nice going, Elliot. And if that's the way we're going to end this, it's a very nice way to end.
I think what we're going to do is when we end this, I hope, Eli, you go back and look at some of the comments in the chat on LinkedIn and reply back to them as I will, because I always appreciate the feedback. This was a very great session. I loved all the interaction. And I want to thank you all for attending today. Eli, it's great to see you. And we will get together for that lunch very soon in person, I promise.
Well, call me. I got the place we can go. In any
Really?
event, Ken, you are a really good interviewer.
I am. Well, that was my first job. I worked at the Record as a reporter many, many, many years ago before I ever did anything else. So yeah,
Cool.
take
Thank you for
care.
having me.